Welcome to the Follow the Leaders podcast, where we get a glimpse into the minds and lives of exceptional leaders and hear about their experiences, insights, and strategies for success. On today's episode, we'll hear from one heart-centered, effective leader and hear about their wisdom and perspective. So get ready to follow along. Welcome back. In today's episode, I'm going to share with you an extension of a conversation that I had last week with Boss Mama, which is one of my work projects and is a professional development group for moms that own businesses. And we meet every other month to discuss a topic that is relevant to us as business owning moms, which can mean lots of different things. It can mean that it's relevant very specifically to our business operations. It can be tied to business growth. It can be tied to our families, because as business owning moms, we are one and the same. There is only overlap in our lives. It all overlaps, and that is by design. It's an opportunity and a challenge. And usually the topics that we discuss lend themselves mostly to one category of our lives. There's usually some overlap there. But the topic we discussed last week is so relevant to all the aspects of our lives and was even more timely given what is happening right now in our country. The topic that we discussed is really the only thing that we can count on for sure in our lives, in our work, in our families. And that is that change is the only constant. We talked about change and how we can accept and welcome change and how we can align our businesses with the evolving phases of our lives and our values. And we talked about ways to recognize when change is happening and when we need to take an active role in leading the change. So this was a topic that was selected for our meeting before November and has become even more salient as the election happened. And now our country as a whole is about to go through a big change, is going through change. That change is affecting our personal lives as well. We are all feeling a sense of change because of the results of the election. So while this topic was selected, without that in mind, it's even more relevant now. And we had such a dynamic discussion in our meetings in the different groups about this topic of change that I wanted to share it here on the podcast and offer a system that I brought to the group. And of course, as always, the group helped to make better when we gather up in community and share ideas and bounce things off of each other. Everything gets better, and including this system of change that I'm going to offer you today. And so I just kind of wanted to tell you a little bit about why this was such an important topic for us to discuss at Boss Mama, and then let you know some of the things that came up as suggestions for how we can all navigate, welcome, adapt to change in our lives and in our work and in our organizations and companies as leaders. So taking it right to the family level, as parents, the very first hard lesson we learn is that just as we start to figure out our babies' sleep schedules, they change, right? We figure out the nap, we think we've got it down, and they're growing, they're adapting. And so out the window goes the, the sleep plan. We need to figure it out all over again. And so that is true of all phases of parenting. You know, my kids are all teenagers, and I'm going to have an adult child in just over a month, which is wild to me. And then shortly after that, my middle child will be an adult in about a year and a half. And then just a short period after that, my third child. And so I'm really getting to see the arc of change of raising children. And that is the same in business as well. When you start a job, a leadership position, you start a company, it's just going to constantly evolve. To try to think that things are going to stay the same, you're setting yourself up for failure. Things are going to continue to evolve and change. And some change is planned for, and some is not. Some is welcome, some is not. Some is our own choice, and some is happening, quote, to us. This can be changes in our family. This can be changes in the structure of our business. It can be changes in staff. It can be changes in society. It can be changes in community. It can be changes in law and policy that affect the way that we operate our organizations. And as leaders, so often the people around us look to us to guide them through the change. I would imagine that most of you woke up to a flurry of text messages on the morning after the election of people looking to you for like, now what? Now what? That happens probably in most big moments in your life, that people look to you, now what? And that's certainly true of our children who look to us, now what? We become the flight attendants in the people's lives around us. When you're on a flight and there's turbulence, you look to the flight attendant, you want to be reassured by their reaction that even if something is scary or big happening in the moment, that it's going to be okay, right? We just instinctively look to the flight attendant to see their reaction when there's turbulence. People in our lives do that to us because that's who we are as leaders. That's who we are as leaders of our family, as parents. This is who we are as leaders in our community. This is who we are as leaders that have platforms, and in our organizations, certainly as well. And so one message that I give to people around me, my kids, my team, my family, my friends, when there is a change that is about to happen, is that things always feel hardest right before a change. The moments before a change happens, those are the ones where the anxiety is highest. There's the most amount of uncertainty. Things always feel the hardest right before a change. Once the change happens, our brains adapt, we get used to the new normal, but things always feel hardest right before the change. And so sometimes it's just that acknowledgement that we are in the right before moment, and we just need to wait for that first day of school, first day of the new job, change in the policy, major life event, change in community, whatever it is, that the moments before where there's the least action to take, we just need to wait for the change to happen, that those can feel the hardest and biggest. The next thing to keep in mind is that when you are the one that is leading your group, and I'm just going to say group here, your family, your friends, your community, your organization, your company, that people in general want to know first, how is this change going to affect them? And so if you can take a moment and instead of talking about high level change, consider addressing how the change is going to affect them. If you are moving to a new payroll system, first, instead of going straight to like all of the benefits to this new payroll system and why and all of the backstory of that, explaining to your team what is going to be different for them. They're going to need to download a new app. They're going to have to learn a new passcode. They're going to get paid on a different schedule. Whatever it is, what are the tangible ways that this is going to affect them? If you are telling your children about, you bought a new house and you're so excited and it's wonderful and you're moving to a new neighborhood, how is this change going to affect them? Are they going to have to go to a new school? Are they going to still be able to walk to their friends' houses? Starting with how is the change going to affect them? And then breaking down what will be staying the same and what will be changing. Because so often we focus on what is new when we're communicating about change to people, but there's always things that are staying the same. And so first starting with, okay, yes, this change is coming, whether it's a change that we chose or that we didn't choose, whether it's a positive change or a negative change, can we start with what is staying the same? And this can be helpful even in our own brains. We're, as leaders, balancing both our internal experience of the change and the external experience of the change, what's happening for us inside, and then we need to somehow lead other people through it. What is going to stay the same? That can be a calming realization that many things are going to stay the same, even if something is changing. And then how will you evaluate the change, and when will you evaluate the change to see if further changes need to be made or go back to the old system? Let's use the payroll example. If we're going to say we're going to do this for 6 months and we're going to see how we like the new system, and then we'll have a discussion about whether it's working, what are the hiccups are, all of that. I signed a lease for a new office this past summer, and it naturally is going to come to an end at the end of the lease term. That's going to give us a natural opportunity to explore whether this office is the right fit for the next chapter. But let's say it was a lease that didn't have an end date. It was just automatically renewing. We might go much longer without evaluating whether this space was fitting our needs anymore, if there was not a checkpoint at some point in the future. So whether or not this is a change you're choosing, when will we evaluate if anything does need to be tweaked in the future? So when I am trying to organize information or ideas, I often come up with some really nerdy frameworks. And I've already shared a few of them on this podcast in previous episodes, but I'm going to share one with you today. And that is the C's of change. And this was a framework that we discussed at our Boss On meeting and through discussion adapted. And I'm going to share with you the current working system for it. And if you have suggestions of ways to change it or things to add or suggest, I would love for you to reach out to me. You can find the link to reach out in the show notes, but I'm on Instagram at Jamie Gale LLC or at Follow the Leaders Pod. And I would love to hear your thoughts on the system. And, if you have any suggestions, I'm all ears. So the C's of change. The first step is realizing, and this was something that was added by Wesley Zimmerman during our meeting, so shout out Wesley, is that we need to realize that this is a situation in which we are the captain. We have to recognize that, we need to step into leadership in this way and recognize that we are going to be the ones that are looked to lead this change. So that realization that it is time to activate in that way is the first step. The next C is to communicate and clearly. Communicate clearly, because that's two C's, communicate clearly. And so this is to say in very specific terms, as specific as you can get, like I was mentioning, what is the change going to be? Who is it going to affect? And how is it going to affect them? It's okay to share a bit about why a change is happening without getting into too much of the nitty gritty, because you don't want to bog people down with too much information. As soon as our brains hear that change is coming, we can kind of get into overwhelm mode. And so just kind of keeping the communication clear. And another member of Boss Mama pointed out that this is a step that we often try to glaze over. We feel maybe bad, or we feel awkward about instituting a change, or we received bad news and we don't want to upset the person we're talking to. But that can often lead to us being vague or not sharing enough information. And that feeling when you're on the receiving end of that is confusion, frustration. You feel like you missed a step. The rug got pulled out from under you. So pausing long enough, even if it is not great information, or even if the person you're telling the information to is not going to be happy about it, taking the time to clearly communicate that step. As leaders, our minds are so busy. And by the time we know that a change is happening, we are like 100 steps ahead. And so we need to pause long enough to go back and start at square one and communicate the basics of the change to the people that it impacts. The next C is compassion. And I was researching lots of different change frameworks in preparation for the Boss Mama meeting. And this is a step that I really saw missed in a lot of the frameworks, is having compassion for the humans that this impacts. The reality is that we are resilient as people. Children are resilient. Adults are resilient. We've all been through so much change in our society over the past handful of years, and we will continue to be in that situation. We will handle it. We will handle it, but it is hard. And so if you're communicating about a change to your family, to your community, to your business, to your friends, taking a moment to pause and realize that this has real human impact, and having compassion for the response that people are going to have, and for yourself as well. It's not a suck it up mentality. Pausing long enough to be like, hey, I get it that this is, change is hard. It's been easy the way we've had it. Whatever it is, this is bad news. Whatever the change is, having compassion for the impact of the change. The next C is coordination. So this is where, as leaders, our minds can go a million miles an hour, like I was mentioning. We also know and we feel like we can rely on ourselves to adapt and make a plan. I'm a big proponent of build the bridge as you walk on it, but especially in times of change, we need to, and this is something that we all are working on as leaders, we need to be really clear both internally, what are the steps that need to be coordinated? And again, going back to that communication piece, really doing a good job of coordinating the pieces. People cannot read our minds, and the feeling of frenzy in the midst of a change or of an upcoming change, steps can be missed, and the change can be poorly executed. And so taking time to think, write out, brain dump, make a Google Doc list, use your Apple Notes bullet, whatever it is, to really think, what are the steps that need to be coordinated through this change, to do it well so that it is impactful, that it is more than an idea. It's the meat of the change, is the coordination. Oftentimes, we as busy leaders, ambitious people, the idea is where we put the most of our energy, but we really need to put it into the execution of the change. And then the last step is completion. So what will a completed change look like? Oftentimes we say to our team, oh, we're going to start this new project. We're going to start this new program. And we just say, oh, we're going to run it. We're going to run this new program. In our minds, we know that after we run it once, twice, 6 times, whatever it is, we're probably going to change it again. And so it's never, quote, done. Business ownership, nothing is ever done. Leadership, nothing is ever done. We are always looking to improve and grow. But that feeling of just sort of endless change can be very overwhelming for our team, our family, our community we are leading. And it also does create a sense of instability, even that if we don't see it, and even if we have a very high threshold for uncertainty, it still is uncertainty that is in our brains and our minds and our bodies. And so defining what will completed look like. And so maybe that is saying, we're going to run the program twice. And at the end of the 2 times, we're going to consider that a successful launch. And at that point, we're going to decide, are we going to keep it the same and continue, or are we going to change it again? even if we are very probably going to change it again, it's okay to say the change will be completed when. I just did some remodeling in my house, and it's easy to be like, okay, and now what? And now what? And now what? But I realized that my kids are sick of having people in the house. And so I needed to communicate to them that we're not doing any more construction for a while. The change is done. The change is complete now. And so that can create a sense of security, of consistency, of comfort, and can allow you to take a step back and evaluate where to put your energy. Do we need to continue evolving, or are we able to move our attention elsewhere? So those are the steps. And whether you formally write them out or just are aware of them as you move through the change, whether it is, communicating a health diagnosis to your team, your staff, whether it is changing a policy, whether it is something even tremendously wonderful. You got a huge grant, and so you're adding a whole new segment of staff to your organization. That would be so wonderful. It's still change, and we still need to realize that people are looking to us to be the flight attendant and show them that this is going to be okay, even if we're not sure if it's going to be good, if it's something that isn't good, isn't a positive change. We as leaders need to guide the change. People are looking to us to guide the change. And so if we take the time to consider the impact, consider how we're going to communicate it, consider how we can be compassionate to the people in our lives about the change, really take time to think about how to coordinate the change, and then consider what does a completed change look like? And at what point are we going to evaluate whether we are ready for things to stay the same in that category, or whether more change needs to happen, that we can more effectively lead those around us through whatever the change is, whether that's our family, our community, our company, our friends and family. We as leaders, we are naturally the ones that people look to. And so let's do a great job in guiding our people through change. Then that will help us cope with and successfully navigate change. So that's my challenge to you. Consider, what are the changes that you are currently experiencing at home or at work? What are the ones that are going to be coming up? What are the parts that feel the stickiest or the most overwhelming? And then what are the strategies that you can layer on to shift away from fear and into the potential of the change? If it is controllable change, what can we do to help those around us feel more secure through the change so that it is most successfully implemented? And if it is uncontrollable change, still again, what can we do to help our own systems and the systems of those around us feel ready for the change and feel empowered to navigate through the change? Because that will lead to a more successful change, better outcomes, better feelings, growth. And again, this is the only thing we really know, is that things are going to continuously change. And that is a beauty of life and also a challenge. And so let's do what we can to navigate it successfully and to adapt to the idea that we are always going to be adapting. Thank you so much for listening today. If you have any other thoughts on this topic or other topics that you'd like to hear me talk about, or suggestions for the podcast, please reach out to me. And you can find the link in the show notes, and we'll be back next time with another inspiring conversation. Follow the Leaders is produced by Lit Path Studios, and music is by Shane Ivers. You can hear more about this show and all the other podcasts at Lit Path Studios by going to www.litpathstudios.com.